Hey, my name is Gleb Alexandrov. Welcome to the first tutorial from that part of the course where we're gonna be focusing on different techniques of creating photoscan 3D environment assets like this roadblock. And actually we're gonna start off by recreating this precise roadblock. First, we'll pre-process the raw photos captured on an average mobile phone in Darktable, a freely available software for developing the raw photos. Then we'll align the photos and reconstruct the mesh in full detail in Reality Capture. After that, we'll clean it up by removing the redundant areas and filling in the gaps. Then we'll use the Blender's sculpting capabilities to further tweak the mesh. We will simplify the mesh for baking textures, then unwrap and reproject textures in Reality Capture. To make it a really versatile 360 degrees complete asset, we'll inpaint the missing textures by utilizing projection and clone stamping in Blender. Finally, as a bonus to this video, we'll learn how to use the AI-based upscaling to resize the albedo texture. It'll be a totally magical part. I recommend you don't skip it. And hopefully after watching this tutorial, you will be able to get something like that. Feel free to download the sources to be able to follow along and buckle up. Before we begin though, a quick disclaimer. The source photos for this tutorial were captured on a mobile phone in RAW format. No expensive DSLRs were involved. Our workflow of creating photoscanned 3D assets starts in Darktable. It's the free and open source software for processing raw photos. And let me start off right away by dragging and dropping the raw files into the user interface like this. As a plan B, if it doesn't import, use Add to Library button. Hit plus, then navigate to the folder with the source photos and proceed from there. If for some reason you don't see the left panel with import, you can hit this little triangle to expand it, because it's collapsible. The left panel also has the Image Information tab, which is pretty useful. You can check the model of the camera used. In our case, it was a pre-average mobile camera, and other parameters like resolution and so on and so forth. The same goes for the right panel. If you don't see it, click on the triangle to expand. We will need a history stack panel from there, and also obviously the export panel to export the processed sources once we're done with it. Alright, to start the development process, you can either double-click on the image or enter the darkroom mode from there. In the darkroom, we develop our digital negative into something that can be exported out. First, let's click on this icon and select the scene referred defaults. We can also click on the little cog icon over there to enter the settings, head over to the processing menu, and apply the scene referred defaults. And while we are on this page, I would also recommend to head over to the storage menu and untick the write sidecar file for each image checkbox. Otherwise, Darktable will keep populating the XMP files, which I don't like. Now I'm making sure that pretty much all modules are disabled. Let's try to keep it minimal. The filmic RGB and other aesthetically driven adjustments should be probably turned off as well. I'm gonna quickly visit this menu again and enable all modules, just for a second, to see if the base curve is turned off. If you don't have the scene referred default in Darktable, you will probably have to deal with the base curve. The base curve is like the S-shaped contrast curve automatically applied to the source raw photos. Without such a curve, it looks visually washed out, but that's exactly what we need. We need to keep everything linearized, so the base curve should be turned off. Let me re-enable the scene referred tabs and start the actual adjustment process. First, I'm gonna visit the white balance tab and adjust the temperature. To not completely eyeball it, I'm gonna click on the eyedropper icon, and then I will try to define the patch of the image that I think should be the neutral gray. It's pretty hard to nail without the gray card reference present in this scene, or the color checker, for example. But if you didn't have one, just try to find the patch that is close to the neutral gray. I think that should be close enough. It's a good indication that the white balance is set correctly if everything starts to look a little bit yellowish. It means that the influence of the blue sky goes away, and that could look unnatural indeed. On the other hand, we are preparing the albedo texture, not the final image. Alright, the second thing after adjusting the white balance is to adjust the exposure. Of course, the RAW files only have as much fidelity as they have. The exposure should be probably adjusted on set, but we can try to adjust it within a certain range in post as well. Just like with the white balance, it would be very handy indeed if we had the gray card reference present in the scene. The 18% gray card combined with the eyedropper could give us some reference point to measure. But anyway, let's not get too serious about it and just try to eyeball it. Oftentimes it's worth making it a little bit brighter than you think it should be. After all, it's supposed to be the albedo texture, and the values that you see on display will get linearized for rendering. To sort of help remove the lighting information from the source images, I will turn on the tone equalizer. I will tone down the upper bands, and hopefully it by itself will help to equalize the lit and shaded areas. Alternatively, you can use the mouse wheel while hovering over the certain portions of the image to adjust that band. While this is not an alternative for a proper delighting, that's a good starting point, and in some cases it could suffice for the final delighting. Like in this case, I think. Aside from that, I would adjust the sharpness levels. First, we disabled everything, now let's bring back the sharpen module. I will zoom in to see the effect a little bit clearer, and the only thing I'll touch is adjusting the amount. I will set it to 2. I'll suspect that the video compression will eat that stuff up, but to reiterate, the sharpen was set to 2, and it's good. Now going back over to light table where we have all our source photos, and in the history stack, I will press selective copy, and I will make sure that the white balance is also selected. Then pressing OK. Then it's a matter of expanding the selection to all the sources by either pressing Ctrl A or holding Shift and clicking on the first and last image, and then selective paste. And OK. It looks to me like the development settings have been propagated to all 44 images. Now we just have to export it. The usual stuff. First we need to define the output folder. I created a subfolder within the source files to not accidentally forget where I put it. And what's for the settings? It's a good practice to stay away from JPEGs usually and use uncompressed formats like TIFF. 8-bit would be enough. For the 8-bit sources, sRGB can be the image profile. Then we can either export it in full resolution and then use something like XNView for batch resizing the images, or we can trim the resolution from the set size field, like 2K pixels wide. And finally, happily export it out.